Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. The coalition of the willing gathered in London on Friday to grant more weapons for Ukraine. This comes a day after the EU failed to reach a consensus on frozen Russian assets. We'll have more on that in a moment, but first let's take a look at tonight's headlines.
We are working on how to circumvent these sanctions.
US sanctions against Russia's oil companies hit Hungary, still highly dependent on Russian imports.
We will prevail, we will persevere. There's no stopping this protest.
Imprisonment instead of a fine. Georgian protesters face sharper penalties a year after a contested election. And city councillors in Poland's port city of Gdynia request more police forces, citing rising hybrid threats from Russia. There will be more missiles, aircraft and training for Ukrainian soldiers. That's the outcome of today's coalition of the willing meeting in London, with the group determined to bring Russian President Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table. Kazimierz Łysiak reports.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky received a royal welcome from King Charles in London on Friday. The sight of bayonets likely reminding Zelensky of the struggle at home, Ukrainian soldiers defending their country from Russia. And that's why the Ukrainian leader arrived in the UK to gather more support from his Western allies at the meeting of the coalition of the willing.
As soon as Putin felt pressure and the possibility of tomahawks appearing in Ukraine, he immediately declared his readiness to restart talks. But as soon as the pressure disappeared, he abandoned diplomacy again. So it's obvious for us what to do. We need more deep strike capabilities.
Zelensky has been calling for more long-range missiles from the United States, specifically the Tomahawks, to be able to strike more strategic targets deep in Russia, but with no green light from US President Donald Trump yet.
It takes a year of intense training to learn how to use it, and we know how to use it, and we're not going to be teaching other people. It will be too far out into the future.
Zelensky is turning to others for such weapons, and it looks like he will get them, at least from the UK.
I think there's further we can do on capability, particularly long-term, long-range capability, and of course the vital work of the coalition willing when it comes to the security guarantees that are necessary.
Ukraine says it struck a Russian chemical plant earlier this week using the British Storm Shadow missiles. These long-range weapons are crucial because they can severely cripple Russia's supply lines and ability to strike targets in Ukraine.
Of course, to use the adage, they add another tool to the toolbox, and it's a very powerful tool. War is 90% logistics. So when we're able to hit their, as you mentioned, their supply lines, when we're able to hit their chemical manufacturing plants, when we're able to hit their, very famously now, their oil capacity, we understand that one of the reasons the Allies were able to be successful and victorious in World War II was the cutting off of the Germans' oil.
Apart from long-range missiles from the UK, Ukraine can count on further military support from the other 20 members of the coalition of the willing, including Poland, Denmark and France.
I want to confirm, Volodymyr, that we will deliver in the days to come additional Aster missiles, new training programs and new Mirage, and we will, with some other colleagues, confirm some additional initiatives.
The Ukrainian president ends the week not with an ideal, but definitely a positive balance. According to him, Ukraine could receive the Russian frozen assets by 2026.
The first one is political decision, then practical decision, and then only then implementation. And I think that yesterday we've got political decision. That's why I think this is positive signal. Then practical decision. We hope that we can get it to the end of this year.
For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Łysiak.
European leaders failed to agree on a €140 billion reparation loan for Ukraine. Talks in Brussels on a Thursday ended without progress, but European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen believes she can sway the skeptics, including Belgium's Prime Minister, by the end of the year. Our EU correspondent Angela Skugins reports from Brussels.
This structure behind me here in the heart of Brussels might just look like a drab building, but this is Euroclear. It sits at the centre of a political firestorm and could also hold the key which could give Ukraine the very much needed financial boost it requires to continue repelling Russian aggression. It contains roughly €200 billion worth of immobilised Russian state assets. The European Commission on Thursday proposed its bold pitch to give Ukraine a €140 billion reparations loan, provided by the cash proceeds from some of these immobilised assets held here. Despite the initiative being brought to the table, the Belgian Prime Minister Bart De Wever held firm on what he needs from his European allies before he signs off on the political agreement. We're talking about the mutualisation of the risk to his European allies, giving guarantees so that if Russia comes knocking for the money, they will help front up the cash. After the meeting, he stated that no clarity was provided.
Can this be legal? This is a very good question. It's a very good question. There are no clear answers.
While the €140 billion loan poses major financial and political challenges, one expert told TVP World that Europe cannot afford not to give Ukraine the money.
If this decision is not taken, Ukraine will face essentially a financial catastrophe, and its ability to defend itself against Russia and defend the rest of the EU against Russia will potentially be undermined.
The Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky says he needs the money over the next 2 years. He will use the cash to purchase Ukrainian and European-made weapons to repel Russian aggression on the battlefield. And while this proposal faced a major speed bump on Thursday, it's not the end of the road. European leaders will convene once again in December, where they're expecting to hear a more robust pitch from the European Commission about the legalities and feasibility of moving forward on the file. For now, the immobilised Russian state assets will stay here at Euroclear, but maybe in the future, the contents of what is in this grey building will turn into gold for Kyiv. Angela Skugins from Brussels for TVP World.
Central and Eastern European governments have until November 21st to decide what to do with assets and contracts with Lukoil, a major Russian oil company sanctioned on Thursday by the United States. Lukoil has 2 refineries in the region and is a major crude supplier for Slovakia and Hungary. Failure to decouple brings the risk of falling under sanctions, but Hungarian leader Viktor Orbán says he will find a way to evade them. Jakub Kapiszewski has more.
This is Lukoil's refinery in Burgas, the largest in Bulgaria. With US sanctions looming, Sofia must act fast to keep petrol flowing at the pumps.
The first phase is related to inspection and monitoring. Together with the Agency for the Storage of Temporary Stocks, we will discuss and review all quantities of fuel. The second phase is related to preventive measures, which will allow us to develop a specific plan.
Selling the refinery is seen by Bulgarian politicians as one of the options.
The sooner Lukoil is relieved of the Burgas refinery, the better, because it is part of Russian influence.
A similar problem is faced by the Romanian government, where Lukoil has another facility, but finding a buyer in 1 month amounts to a fire sale.
Will it be possible to sell the refineries in Bulgaria and Romania? If yes, it definitely won't be at an attractive price, and any potential buyer would probably purchase those shares at a significant discount.
But an even bigger headache is in store for the governments of Slovakia and Hungary, for whom Lukoil is a major oil supplier.
If Washington does turn a blind eye and doesn't enforce sanctions it imposed, then there won't be an issue. But if it does enforce them strictly, I think both capitals will have a serious problem keeping that oil flowing.
During an interview with the state-owned media, Prime Minister Viktor Orban stressed Hungary aims to stand by Russian crude.
This game is not over. There are indeed sanctions against certain Russian oil companies now. I started the week by talking to the leaders of them all several times. We are working on how to circumvent these sanctions.
Neighbouring Slovakia is likely to look for a sanctions exemption to be able to continue purchases of Russian crude. Any further actions taken by CEE governments depend on how exactly the sanctions are applied.
So it's all very wobbly, and in many ways it remains to be seen whether those sanctions will really be enacted.
One thing's for sure, the region's energy map is in for a redraw.
Pro-European demonstrators in Georgia can now face a prison sentence rather than fines for voicing their disappointment with the government in Tbilisi. But the new law isn't discouraging protesters from gathering in the streets of the capital city, with main demonstrations expected on Sunday, 1 year after the disputed election which led to a major political divide in Georgia. Piotr Miszczuk has this report.
This was yet another blockade of Tbilisi's main street, Parliament facing Rustaveli Avenue, in yet another protest against the ruling Georgian Dream, which consolidated power nearly a year ago after a contested election. The protesters are subject to harsh legal regulations.
All of these amendments, all of the new laws that have been adopted, all of them are draconian in nature, and they have only one specific aim. They're targeting specific people, they're trying to frighten them, and they're trying to strangle protests.
Following the adoption of an amendment last week calling for imprisonment instead of fines for protest-related offences such as blocking roads or wearing face coverings, demonstrators can now face up to 15 days behind bars for a first-time offence. Repeat offenders will face up to 2 years. Georgians continue to protest nonetheless.
We will prevail, we will persevere. There's no stopping this protest, there's no stopping demonstrators, there's no stopping fighting for justice.
And this produces a large number of arrests.
We have now around more than 100 people that are serving some sort of sentence based on these dubious charges.
There's plenty of fuel for the Georgian protests now, from the recent amendment and the upcoming anniversary of the disputed election to the awarding of the EU's prestigious Human Rights Prize to a protester who has been in jail since January.
That the 2025 Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought has been awarded to Andrei Pochobut from Belarus and Zia Amlagobeli from Georgia.
The ruling party is cracking down not just on protesters, but also on some of their own politicians. Former Prime Minister Irakli Garibashvili and member of the ruling Georgian Dream Party has been charged with money laundering.
Right now, the group of the current Prime Minister, Kobakhidze, has won, and they're eliminating all of their competitors. The biggest competitor of Kobakhidze's group was Irakli Garibashvili.
$6.5 million in cash were reportedly seized at Garibashvili's house.
During his time in office, Irakli Garibashvili clandestinely and covertly engaged in various business activities and has been receiving illicit income on a remarkably large scale.
The alleged crime concerns the period between 2019 and 2024, when he served as the country's Minister of Defense and Prime Minister.
The accused has pleaded guilty in full to the charges brought against him.
And he was released on bail, but some experts say there's more to his freeing after he had allegedly fallen out of favor of Bidzina Ivanishvili, the billionaire ex-Prime Minister widely considered Georgia's de facto ruler.
Basically, it's about loyalty and it's about money too. And he is not in the jail right now only for one reason, because he brought back the money that Ivanishvili requested.
Experts now expect the protests to peak on Sunday, on the first anniversary of the disputed election. For TVP World, I'm Piotr Miszczuk.
Tensions are running high in the Polish port city of Gdynia. Local officials are warning that it has become a target of Russia's hybrid war. Earlier this month, police have detained a 42-year-old suspect accused of setting fire to cars with Ukrainian license plates and later found explosive-making materials in his apartment, raising fears of further planned attacks. Our reporter Aisha Bachi is in Gdynia with more.
We are in Gdynia, Poland's Baltic port city, where local authorities are sounding the alarm, saying that their city has become the target of Russian hybrid war.
We need to strengthen these forces because this hybrid war is growing stronger every day, every month. We can see it on many levels. Today everything is fine. The police are handling challenges very well. They quickly apprehended the perpetrator responsible for setting fire to cars with Ukrainian license plates. But we must think ahead. Soon it may happen that we will need many more forces.
The warnings follow a series of anti-Ukrainian incidents, namely the burning of cars with Ukrainian license plates, as well as the sabotage attempt of a restaurant that was displaying a Ukrainian flag. Now, we have spoken to local police here in Gdynia, and here's what they had to say.
In 2024, we recorded 12 proceedings related to acts involving crimes of a nationality-based nature. This year, we have recorded 16 such acts. It is a relatively small increase, and most of them did not involve a direct attack on a person, but rather concerned property or national symbols of another country.
Gdynia is located on Poland's Baltic coast and is a major economic and military port capable of handling large vessels, giving it crucial strategic importance in the region. Since 2022, it has served as a key logistics hub for delivering military technical assistance from NATO countries to Ukraine, facilitating the flow of Western military supplies to Kiev.
Gdynia is a place through which a great deal of weaponry for Ukraine passes. We must keep in mind that Russia is becoming increasingly aggressive. We simply have to secure ourselves.
So local officials say that at this point, protecting the city is a matter of national security. Reporting from Gdynia for TVP World, I'm Aisha Badja.
Members of the Coalition of the Willing have gathered in London today to grant more weapons for Ukraine. Western pressure on Moscow is mounting after the US introduced sanctions on Russia's energy sector for the first time during US President Donald Trump's second term, while the EU adopted its 19th sanctions package aimed to cripple the Russian war machine. Marcin Zaborowski, TVP World's Europe editor, discussed this with Daniel Fried, former US ambassador to Poland. So that's all from me for now, and here's the interview.
Our guest today is Daniel Fried, the former American ambassador to Poland, quite a legend in this country. He knows everyone around the town. Mr. Ambassador, it is an absolute pleasure that you could join us for this conversation today, especially on the week like that. This has been quite a week, really, hasn't it?
Oh, yes.
So let's just remind our viewers a few things. So that the summit of Putin-Trump is not going through, so we can't even say that it's been cancelled. Then also what we have here is the EU has approved a new package of sanctions, and the Donald Trump administration has also announced that it's approving new sanctions on the Russian energy companies. So quite a lot on our plate, and can we say that the transatlantic cooperation is back on track, that we have a united front towards helping Ukraine, really?
Well, we certainly have had a good week of coordination to put extra pressure on the Russian economy. And don't forget, the British announced earlier this week sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil, the two energy companies the Trump administration hit. So this is British, EU, US cooperation for helping Ukraine. And it's putting more pressure on the Russian economy. So this is good. You can't ever relax. My rule about the Trump administration is it's never as bad as you fear, nor is it as good as you hope. In other words, this was a good week, but the Trump administration is capable of sudden reversals, and President Trump is capable of that himself. So I don't want to go too far and then tomorrow have to explain why I was over-optimistic with you today. Still, it's a good step. The fact is that Vladimir Putin's arrogance could be his downfall. That is, he gave Trump a lecture about Bogdan Khmelnytsky and Yaroslav the Wise. What was he thinking? Trump wants a deal. He wants to mediate a peace between Russia and Ukraine. Trump's view of the world is not the same as mine, but he's the president and I'm not. He wants to negotiate a deal, and the current deal that Trump suggested could work. That is, at the end of the meeting with Zelensky a week ago, Trump said that there should be a ceasefire along the current line of contact. In other words, he rejected Russia's position that Ukraine retreat to give Russia all of Donetsk and Luhansk provinces that Russia's been unable to conquer after 3 years of war. The Russians insist on that. Zelensky resisted. Trump apparently, or he seems at the moment to be supporting Zelensky, which is the right position. So this outline of a deal could work. Recognize the current line of contact, but without recognizing it as permanent, like recognize it as a ceasefire line, and then some security for Ukraine. That could work. Putin doesn't want to accept it yet. So the sanctions are a way of telling Putin, think again. Now, as long as we're on to the week's events, there was a small story, but an important one. There was a story that the U.S. gave permission to the British to give permission to the Ukrainians to use a Storm Shadow missile against a target in Bryansk, in Russia. Indeed. If that's true, it's also a sign that the Trump administration is apparently prepared to ratchet up the military pressure. Now, I would like it if the Americans gave the Ukrainians the Tomahawk cruise missiles. Sure, I'd love that. But to take this step about the Storm Shadow is another way of telling Putin, why don't you reconsider your maximalism and your demands for Ukrainian surrender? I don't know that it'll work. These sanctions, the new American sanctions, have to be implemented. And there is a license with holding them back for a couple of weeks to allow companies to wind down their business. That's standard practice. Still, Trump could pull them. He could hold them. He could have another phone call with Putin and reverse himself. So I'm not saying I'm not saying we're back on track as you suggested and as I hope we are, but we could be. So it's a good week, and I'm going to enjoy that moment, but also be prepared for less good news if it comes.
It's a good but a little bit bumpy week too, isn't
exactly.
it? So
exactly.
It's always a roller coaster with Donald Trump.
Absolutely right.
You can't be sure.
Oh, we can be sure, but it's good to remember that the doubts and the skepticism about Trump, where Trump comes out, do have a basis. I understand this, but that's not necessarily what will happen. If you step back and look at the arc of the Trump administration's policy toward Ukraine, it's better now than it was in January. It's better now than it was in January. I wish it were better still. I wish it were a straight path, not a crooked path. But it doesn't matter what I want.
Of course. Well, I wish it was that way.
Don't we all?
You mentioned London. So obviously we have today the coalition of the willing meeting.
Yeah.
And President Zelensky is there in London, meeting both with King and with the leaders. Are you hopeful about the results of that meeting? I mean, what the Ukrainians seem to expect from that is two things: finance and long-range missiles. You already mentioned Storm Shadows, which are British version of long-range missiles. Is it enough? Do you think that the Ukrainians will get what they need from that meeting?
Well, I don't know what they will get from the United States. I can't predict the Trump administration's decision about the Tomahawks. But Europe is getting very close to using the immobilized Russian foreign exchange reserves as support for an interest-free loan to Ukraine. That's a very big deal, and some of us have been seeing this coming. You know, if you're the German Chancellor, do you really want to ask the German taxpayers to pay for American arms to Ukraine when you're sitting on perfectly good Russian money that can do the job? So I think this could come out the right way. I hope it does very soon. You mentioned the coalition of the willing. I think that they have some tough decisions before them. I think that Ukrainian security, well, in my opinion, it ought to be NATO membership. But if that's not going to happen, the best, second best, is the coalition of the willing and supplying Ukraine with arms. And maybe the coalition could provide some kind of military support for Ukraine. Maybe. Air cover, air defense. I think defense of Ukraine after a ceasefire is more practical, seems more practical than I thought it was 10 or 15 years ago. Think about it. Ukraine has basically defended itself with Western weapons, but no Western troops, for 3, almost getting on 4 years. That's pretty good. Ukraine's geography is a lot better than Poland's in 1939, right?
Geopolitics is much better too.
It's much better. We can go on about all the mistakes the Germans have made with respect to their Russia policy, but they recognize that now. Poland has won that argument, and Germany's done a lot for Ukraine. So Ukraine has friends at its back, and its position is much stronger. Defending Ukraine is possible because the Ukrainians are capable of defending themselves with our help. Now we have to convince Putin that he's not going to win this war. And we still have work to do.
So you mentioned the possibility of air cover. There has been a mention here in Poland that in case we have another incursion of Russian drones coming to our territory that happened a few weeks back, we could even consider a possibility of shooting some of these drones when they are still over the Ukrainian territory, and Ukrainians are happy for us to do that. Do you think that would be a sensible thing to do?
I don't want to advise the Polish government about how it should defend itself, but this is the right discussion to have. The way I would put it is nothing wrong with defending forward, and warning the Russians that this is a possibility. Now, there also has to be a cheaper way of shooting down drones than using very expensive missiles coming off of, F-16 fighter aircraft, or eventually F-35s. So the technology of defense needs to be there, but your strategic and political question is the right one. Should the West, and it's not just up to Poland, Poland does not stand alone and should not stand alone. Should the West defend forward? I think so. I think it should. Now, that, as an American, we need to give backup to Europeans if they decide to defend forward. And the question is, do we want Ukraine to win this one? I define winning, by the way, as not all of Ukraine liberated, but Ukraine, the 80% of Ukraine in the hands of the Ukrainians to be free and secure and backed up. That's not great, but if you ask the Finns, they won the Winter War because Finland still exists, and there was never the People's Republic of Finland, thanks to that war. You see what I'm thinking.
Mr. Ambassador, my last question is about the hybrid threats. So they've been multiplying here in Poland and in other parts of the region. Only, I think, day before yesterday, we had another plot discovered with the possible sabotage attacks on the Polish territory. Do you think that NATO, as the alliance, is prepared to deal with hybrid threat, or is just reacting to some hybrid threats? Should we have some kind of rules of automatic response to proven acts of sabotage?
I think that NATO, the EU, and European governments consulting with the United States should develop plans for responding to these threats. These are threats. This is aggression. Poland is not alone, and it doesn't stand alone. The Germans, I can tell you, have been privately alarmed about Russian aggression, you call it hybrid threats, for some time. Now the head of the German BND, their intelligence service, has testified about this to the Bundestag, so now it's public. Their position is like the Polish position. Notice this. The Germans and the Poles now share a view about the Russian threat. And it's not that the Poles have moved in Germany's direction. Germany has moved in Poland's direction. This is a big deal. Poland used to be an outlier with the Baltic states warning about the Russians. I know, I'm a witness to this. But now the European mainstream opinion is with Poland. This is the time to work within NATO, within the European Union, with whoever in the United States and the Trump administration is willing to work with you about countermeasures, about pushing back this form of aggression.
Thank you. Our guest today was Daniel Fried. Daniel Fried was the former US ambassador to Poland and a former Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs. And you are watching TVP World. My name is Marcin Zaborowski. Please stay with us.